So if you're gonna eat, Arno, if you want. I guess we'll have our program coordinator read her fabulous introduction for Arno.
Yeah, it's funny because I was gonna, Greg was like, you need to be prepared to introduce Arno. And I was gonna say that this is my friend Arno, and I'm so happy that he came to talk to us about crazy stuff we did in the 70s and 80s. But really and truly, if you don't know Arno is an amazing person. I was very lucky to meet when I was involved with the SEC. And he has been climbing since the 70s and the 80s. And I remember seeing pictures. She showed me pictures of you in your tights. So I remember that. I remember that. Hopefully you got one of those pictures there. Awesome. Very and Fernando, you probably climbed in tights too.
Oh, yeah.
Stuart?
Show hands. How many people climb in tights?
Oh, my goodness.
Curtis Glass climbed in tights.
Sharon, did you have tights?
James Dobbs' wife used to make his tights. But Arno has put up a bunch of routes in North Carolina, Whitesides, Laurel Knob, Looking Glass, and a bunch of first ascents, and a bunch of really bold ascents. And for those of you that are newer climbers, think about trying to climb something really hard and not having all the gear that we have today. And I remember having a conversation with you once about the gear. I would feel more comfortable falling on a bolt, and Arno's I would feel more comfortable falling on my gear because I know I put it in and I know it's going to hold. So it's just pretty amazing. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. Nice to be invited regularly to share climbing experiences with you. I think everyone kind of gets sick of me talking about Warrior's Way. So I said, next time, some history on North Carolina climbing. So what I'd like to share with you is part of the the Carolina climbing history that I've taken part in, but it is just a very brief part. Because I don't have pictures about what Shannon has done or anybody else, so I have to share what I have pictures for. So that's what we'll get into tonight. So just make sure you can hear me. If you can't hear me, just please say so I can speak up.
You see?
So my first trip to North Carolina was in '74, and this Buddy Price guidebook actually came out in '77. When we went over there in '74, I just started climbing in '73, so it was I only had 1 year climbing experience. I was pretty intimidated going into North Carolina where there was taller stuff. And we had this little guidebook that Art Williams put together, which was really small, and it was the first guidebook to North Carolina. But in it, well, the first place we went was Devil's Courthouse, and I went there recently with this guy, Kenny Parker, from Tennessee, that was on this '74 trip with me, and he's actually the guy that first took me climbing. We were both in high school together, and he's responsible for me catching the climbing bug. So, but when we went over there, you have this guidebook, had Devil's Courthouse had 4 routes on it.
Don't bother to do grades.
Well, on the next page they had the grades, but this one was called The Groove. It's rated 5.5, and then so we did that one. We did one called The Zigzag, which was I think rated 5.3 or 5.4.
Was it really 5.3 or 5.5?
Yeah, I mean they raised
you at the time, right?
But it's going over there after just climbing some short stuff in Tennessee was kind of intimidating, and we were young, just 18 years old, 19 years old, and 1 year climbing experience. So we'd look in this guidebook, and we'd see, Steve Longnecker and Doc Bain, Roadworth, Gaskin, Shavers, all of these guys that did the first ascents, and really looked up to them. They had the vision, seek out new routes and do the work to put them up.
Look at the shoes they got in the picture, though.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
sticky rubber at the time.
yeah, this book came out in '77, so the Doc Lane's shoes would have been earlier than that, you know, which was EB's probably, or even maybe the Blue Robins, or Blue Suede. So, you know, when you're young, you know, when you're young, you're looking up to the people that came before you, that especially the ones that put up these routes. So we'd look in the guidebook, we'd see, you know, stuff about looking glass and about Table Rock in South Carolina, and of course Whitesides. And, you know, we were thinking like, well, these guys are like Superman, you know, like there's no way that we can do what they're doing. And so they inspired us, but I didn't really think that it was something that I could do myself, you know, to also add to the Carolina climbing history. Until I went out west, I spent about 8 years in Colorado and Wyoming, and I met this guy. Todd Skinner is from Wyoming, and is like really one of the most visionary climbers I've ever known. He regrettably died in 2006 in falling Yosemite. But Todd had this vision about what he called climbing the 4 big walls in North America. And Paul Piana was his partner on 3 of those walls, and he put together their experiences in this book.
I've got that book. I got it at a discount store.
Yeah.
Because it's not a print.
Right. And so the 4 big walls, the first one was El Cap. You know, like this was 1988, before it had been free climbed, and they selected the Salate Wall as the route that they felt like they could free climb, they could work on free climbing it. And they were spending like weeks on these walls to figure out how to climb them. Which he finally did in 1988 at 513B. It seems kind of moderate right now, you know, when you think about the grades.
I knew it does.
Yeah, it's just, you know, moderate. So they achieved, you know, this first big wall. Then they went to Mount Hooker in the Wind Rivers, which is a 2,000-foot wall. And they free climbed the Robbins route that Royal Robbins put up in, I think, 63 or 64. Called it the Jaded Lady. It came in at a more moderate grade. And then they went to Mount Proboscis in the Northwest Territories of Canada. And this is a wall that in 1963, the American Alpine Club talked to Jim McCarthy, who later was actually a president of the AAC. And he said, put together a team of talented climbers and find a project that, you know, would be notable for adding to North American climbing. And so they decided, they put together Leighton Core, Jim McCarthy, Dick McCracken, and Royal Robbins to go here in '63 and put up a route on this wall. Well, when Skinner and Piana went up there, they selected their own climb, and it was right up this really prominent arête that they call the Great Canadian Knife. So he worked on that, and Galen Rowell was also there, the famous photographer, and succeeded on it in 1992. So 88, 90, 92, and then working on the last one, which is Northwest Facing Half Dome. Right? You've been there?
Yeah.
In 93. Now, the regular route on Northwest, on this mountain, climbed up the shoulder and then entered the face here, which is, that was free climbed by Jim Erickson and Art Higby and Earl Wiggins in the 1980s. And that's the route that Alex Hummel was soloing. But Skinner wanted to climb the actual face, like don't climb the shoulder, but climb the actual face from the very bottom. It was a route that Royal Robbins had done, the direct northwest face, they called it. And Skinner, he spent months on that wall. Ran, wearing out climbing partners until, and this is the only wall that Piana didn't finish with it, because it was just taking too long. But Skinner was persistent and finally was able to free it at 13D. So when I was out there, I had moved from Wyoming back to Tennessee in '84.
Last year at this time.
But I still kept going out west, to meet and climb these people that I had gotten to know out there. And so I felt like I saw what Skinner was doing, and I said, maybe we could do a Carolina version of what he was doing, right? What are the 4 main walls in North Carolina that that could also work on free climbing? And so Whitesides was one of them. Right? Now, you probably know that Whitesides, they were when I came back from Wyoming in '84, it's like there are routes on Whitesides, but they're concentrated on this right side. This left side that has the white spot was considered impossible, and no routes were there. So there was like a possibility, like do a route, up that part of the wall, and then work on freeing it. And of course, the north face of Looking Glass, this is the nose area over here. North face is right there. What about free climbing something over there? And another one is something that a lot of people don't know about. Cable Rock, South Carolina. About a 600-foot north face right here. The north face is actually illegal to climb on because the Greenville watershed is right here, and they feel like if a bunch of people get in there, I guess they'll contaminate the watershed.
Was it legal back then?
No.
Nobody.
This is, it's like when I started climbing, climbers were like nonconformists. Now it's like climbers are more accepted as like legitimate people.
I don't know about that.
But the north face, was forbidden to go in there and climb, and all of the routes that were put up were over on the south face, like Stonewall Action and stuff. So I thought maybe the free reflections, which goes up this dihedral system. And then of course Laurel Knob, which probably is the tallest of all of them, and even taller than Cannon Cliff up in New Hampshire, at somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 feet, depending on where you measure it. So, there are other big walls in North Carolina, in Linville Gorge and so forth, but these seem like the biggest ones that I wanted to focus on. So let's start with number 1, with Whitesides. Like I said, I moved back from Wyoming in '84, and I had this new idea about possibilities of putting up new routes, and so I knew that people were talking about the left side being impossible, and when someone throws a label out there like that, it's like some part of us wants to kind of check it out, and see if this is really impossible. Well, it had been attempted by Brad Shaver, and maybe even some others, but like doing a pitch down here, and the climbing on Whitesides, it is hard to protect. Like it does have places for protection, but it definitely is hard to protect. And so North Carolina, the climbers, they have a ground-up ethic. They don't want just a bunch of bolts all over the place. So they would rather abandon something if they can't do it in a reasonable manner. So when I went there in '85, I did what I did the cable rappel. Anybody done that cable rappel? It's like, that's how I was introduced to Whitesides back in like 73, 74 when I was first going to college, by some cavers. Because the cavers like to go there and rig, they rig like a 100-foot rope to get to the edge of where the cliff is overhanging, and then they'll rig a 600-foot rope, practice rappelling down and ascending back up, because there are a lot of vertical caves in the tag area, Tennessee, Chattanooga, Georgia, like Ellison's, where they have fantastic and incredible, the 600-foot pits. And so they'll come over here and practice. And so I went over there and did this cable rappel and ascended back up, and that was my first experience with Whitesides. So when I was looking for new ground possibilities, I just said, well, it makes sense. I get a close-hand look if I do this rappel again. And
Reinforce the impossible aspect to me.
that's where you're wrong. Because really, Whitesides is more featured than you think it is.
Yeah.
And so when you get up close to it, I rappelled down. If I would have rappelled down, if they would have had a cable rappel, 50 feet, every 50 feet all the way across the face, I would have had the same perception that I had rappelling down here was, yeah, I kind of see a line of weakness. And so I partnered up with Eddie Whittemore and Mark Cartwright, and we went there, and it took us 3 days to finish the route. Kind of slabby on the bottom. Some we put in very few bolts, and it did take some extra gear, but it was a little bit run out. And
Look at that blue box.
yeah. And this is at the end of the second day. We're bivvying on this ledge, which is maybe 2/3 of the way up the wall. And Mark Cartwright, he wanted. You know where this photo comes from. Anybody see a picture of Randy Levitt on Sea of Dreams on El Cap? He's at the belay holding a boombox up to his ear, and so Cartwright was wanting to emulate him. But this was the banana. This is our Hall Sector banana, and this was Claire.
Right here.
Is that a Willens harness?
Willens harnesses, yeah.
So who made bags back in those days? All bags.
Eddie. He was sewing. He sewed his own bags.
And then he's wearing EVs and Mark's wearing
He was making packs. He was working for actually Middendorf with A5.
Was he working for
John?
John Middendorf, yeah, when John was in Flagstaff. So we kind of bivvied on this ledge, but this was 2 days in, and I don't know, some of you kind of know my strengths and weaknesses. Well, one of my weaknesses is I don't think enough, okay? It's what got me into my first marriage. But when I'm planning for a route, it's like, I don't put it, I do better now, but I used to not put enough thinking into the logistics. So we ran out of water after 2 days in. And so,
Sounds familiar.
but I knew that I needed to get us off the wall by the third day. And so what I ended up doing is kind of climbing into the night to get a kind of a high point where we could jug up to that high point the next day and speed up things. This next couple of pictures, next few pictures is from a different ascent, just to show you. This is my friend Doyle Parsons, just lowering him out from that belay ledge. It's like really steep right there. So when we were bivvying there, we didn't really know if it's possible to climb that steep section and get off the doggone wall and get water. After all, it was called impossible, right? Labeled that. So we're still working with that label, being in the middle of it.
Could you rappel down if you had to?
Yeah, we could escape that way, certainly. This is like looking down at the same pitch. We call this is the 7th pitch. I call it the jump pitch because I took a really long fall on it. But just fell in the air. I don't know if Scott Perkins was here. He could share. We went there several years ago to do a little bit of a photo shoot for an article I was working on for Alpinist about climbing on white sides, and he said, "Take the fall, take the fall." So I got some extra airtime on it, but you know, you can see with the ropes hanging out, it's a pretty steep wall, but look how featured it is. The climbing on white side is just really beautiful. It's just really featured, and some of the head wall. The thing that is really ironic is that the North Carolina climbers that were putting up the routes on the right side that's more leaning in, those routes were run out and they were hard. And they were thinking, if these routes are this run out and hard, you get over there on the left side, it's going to be even harder, maybe even more run out. But it actually, first of all, if you do fall, you're falling in cleaner fall consequences, right? And second of all, it's actually more featured because it's less weathered. On the right side, it's more sagging, and the water would just run down and just erode the granite down to where it's really smooth. But the left side is like really featured like this, creating sometimes just like 5-7 climbing up there on the head wall.
Did you encounter a lot of loose rock up there, or was it?
Not too much, but I mean, Whiteside is kind of known for having some brittle rock, but deal with it, it's fun climbing. It's like, Wall has a pitch called the rotten pitch, but yeah, some of the rock on it is a little hollow, but just grab it gently and keep going.
What was it, like micro cams and nuts? What did you use for protection?
Used everything from cams. We actually used some copperheads and stuff.
So this is
because
like,
we were 80.
Late 80s, right?
85, yeah.
So microcams didn't exist then?
Yeah, it was like, we had like down to like a number one friend, so maybe STEM friend. So no, well, yeah, I mean they were available, but we even had some homemade versions of those. This is, doing a later ascent where my brother Mark, he's got some striped biker on. He's climbing the last hard pitch on Ball Wall. It's a little more vertical there, and then it's a summit pick of the three of us, Eddie and Mark and myself. So that was 85, and after this time, is when I was going back out and running into Skinner and stuff, and getting inspired to want to come back and see if I could free those 4 walls. So I had already done this ascent, and then I was starting to think, I want to go back and see if I can free it. Which Mark and I were working on it for a couple of years. There was even some times where, this is like that same pitch right there. You see this bolt right here? Well, that bolt wasn't there during our first free efforts. And one time I climbed out and couldn't do it and fell and slammed into the ledge below. And promptly went back and said, I'm in a bolt.
So how do you go from 83 to not 512A-R? That's out, right? It's
Well,
like
it might be
83.
R, but R's got nothing to do with A3, really, does it? Is that the length of the fall that you take?
She's shaky gear, right? By the time you get to 83, you got like multiple kind
Yeah, I
of ice
mean,
and stuff in a row.
You don't stop to put in shaky gear, you just keep going.
Yes.
So,
Avery Small.
You want to get pumped out.
there are places, on this pitch, there's a kind of a pocket, like not a crack, but there's like an indention where you can put in a number 4 friend, like a big can. So there are places that you can protect it, but there are also sections where it's going to run out. But then climbing through the roof is like 12A, but then it goes to 510. So it's relative. can keep it together, you know, on easier terrain. If you can climb a 512 grade, you know, then maybe you can keep it together on terrain for 510. But that was really a great feeling to be able to put that all together and be able to do the free ascent of it with my brother in 1990. You know, so I've kind of been obsessed with Whitesides a little bit. You know, this is kind of after Wall in '85. Went to Barneystone in '86, and Wilmus in '90, and Ship of Fools '91, Promised Land '91, Warriors Way '94, Great Aha in '97, Matrix in 2001, and then Children of the Sun in 2006. And I mean, they're, you know, somewhere in here. I'm not going to point out exactly where everyone is because it wouldn't be hard to figure out exactly where that is. But
And what are those rated?
the different claims, they're all somewhere in the 512 range. You know, at least some pitch on it has some 512A to 512B, something like that. Children of the Sun actually is 12C, like A0. So anybody wants to free it, go for it. Talking to you guys. But you know, when I really feel like I've been in a fortunate time, you know, when a wall like this was available, you know, to actually work on to put up free climbs or first ascents. You know, it's like you don't just have a bunch of walls like that are available to explore like that. So really glad that I had the opportunity to put up some routes and be able to add to the North Carolina history. So there's also this really cool little buttress. You can, if you know anything about Whitesides, right over here around the corner is over probably in the sky. And you can walk around that and then access this Indian tree ledge and hike it all the way to here and actually do the upper part of Ship of Fools. The Ship of Fools kind of goes up like right here. But there's also this really interesting buttress right there. And you can see it a little better right there. And it has this finger crack that is just amazing. You know? And it's like a steep, it's like overhanging and vertical right here, and then overhanging at the top, just a one-pitch finger crack that you can go in, you can wrap to, or walk out there, wrap to the belay ledge, and climb out. And so I worked on that with my brother and was able to climb that in '87. I did a lot of this on it, yeah, but that's part of the game. And then I have some pictures of a few routes and some videos, so I wanted to kind of go through those. So let's look at Wilmus Dangerous, which I did in 1990. This is the first pitch, my friend Benji climbing. This is out in the middle part of the wall, climbing off of what we call Thanksgiving Ledge. It goes through like a bulging roof into kind of a dihedral feature that leads you up to this pitch called the Dollywood pitch. Dollywood for big jugs and wild rides. So sorry, ladies. But I got on this again like a year or two ago, and you can see right here, maybe there's a bolt right there with a sling on it. And I started climbing up, it's like, where the hell is the next bolt? You know, they climbed up and then just started, friggin' next bolt is like way up there. It's like, what is it? It's the first ascent of this thing. You know, it's like, when I go back, I feel like I'd like to add a bolt right there. It's just like, it's not that difficult with climbing, but the consequences are so extreme.
So when you bolted this stuff, were you hand drilling it, or?
Some of the early ones, yeah. On Low Miss, it was hand drilling. We didn't start using a power drill until the Warriors way around. Trouble for that one.
You got in trouble?
Yeah.
For the bolt, for the bolts?
No, for the power drill.
You know, is that, what is that land? So you're not allowed to power drill there?
No, it's okay to use it, but they were feeling like I was putting it too many points.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And anyone who climbs, I think anyone that climbs any of the later routes, like Matrix or Warriors Way or Green Mountain, you're really not going to find that they're overbolted. Like, they're not sport climbs. Have you done that?
They're sport.
Yeah. You know, it's like the bolts are spread out pretty decent. You know,
I
so-
think the controversy with Warriors Way was that you went in from the top down from the lay anchors. They were previewing some of the stuff, not the number of bolts, but.
Well, Lyle Dean said, you know, if one round like that's not enough, it's, you know, nobody doesn't want to see anymore, you know. But yeah, it's like, we did it ground up, but we did do some inspection from the top, you know.
I think that was what the problem was, is that you were like, okay, he's.
I'd kind of rather have that than like a bunch of aborted routes that just go halfway up and just go into nothing.
Personally, I feel like that you did the right thing for that route. And there was a lot of close-minded North Carolina people that were like, it's on our way. And I read your open letter to the North Carolina community. I respected the chalk. I think it was an awesome route.
Yeah, I mean, it's
It's a great route.
It's a visionary, that's the hardest route.
yeah, think about what Tommy Caldwell did on Don Wall. I mean, you know, look how much he had to preview it, you know, and figure out where the line of weakness goes, and why not? You know, he's looking for how to find a line of weakness through that part of the wall, and not just have, like you say, a bunch of aborted efforts that leave bolts and scar the rock and stuff.
And you've got a line that's gonna go and the bolts are in a good spot, you're not gonna die.
I remember hearing that you were the power drill. I can tell you right now,
Yeah.
people talking about, I was like, this damn power drill. And my philosophy was, you know, why
They're
don't
gonna
you
get
try to
plastic.
talk, why don't you try to go
They're gonna
fly
get
it? And then see what you say, and which I did try to find it.
Well,
I'm
I kinda ex-
successful.
I kinda
We did do like the first 5 or 6 pictures down through there, a friend of mine, and I was pretty much amazed
Yeah.
at what you did.
I think the problem was it was a gas powered drill. It made a lot of noise.
And loud.
It could have been.
This is Benji climbing, starting up the Dollywood pitch. So he's got a bolt that's clipped kind of by his feet there. He was like really apprehensive about committing over that bolt. He says, where's the next bolt? Where's the next bolt?
God damn!
He was like really freaking out. But Whiteside's will do that too. But this is the top of the Dollywood pitch. Really, it's 510 and easier, and a lot of it's easier, except for right below his feet. There's like a 11A little section that's protected by a bolt, so it's kind of like they think in a lot of places protect the harder sections and run out the easier ones, but you don't want to be falling on the easier ones. But check out the exposure. It's just such an incredible position to be in up there. The routes are really amazing. Warriors Way is 94, and this was one that I was able to kind of free pretty quickly after the first ascent. So, but it was also sort of a turning point, you know, as far as how the routes were put up. In the beginning, like with Wall Wall and Marnie Stone and Little Miss, it was like, just get up any way you can without thinking about going back and having the route protected in a way that you could free climb it. So I kind of changed that strategy with Warrior's Way. I wanted to put in quality bowls and put them where they were needed so that you'd have reasonable consequences if you fell. This is the second pitch, and Warrior's Way probably is the steepest overall of all of the routes there. Not so much just because of the upper head wall, but because of the lower wall. It like goes through, right through this section. It's the steepest on the lower wall, and it's also steep at the upper wall. So overall, it's like one of the steeper parts, steeper routes on the wall. Here, about halfway up, and you can see the cable rappel. These guys rappelling down, or they're climbing up in tandem. And here, Wes is starting to go up into the upper head wall, and it's pretty steep. And this is looking down on a pitch above that. And these headwall pitches on Warrior's Way are 512B and C, you know, somewhere in there. And then seeing the exposure again, finishing that last 512 pitch. It's just a spectacular position to be in.
Not windy at all.
Not pulling on that draw, is it?
Keep pulling on it. I was pulling on it too. I already did the free ascent. I just want to get up now.
A lot of friction.
But yeah, it is a lot of friction, you know, but there are also edges, just like on his left hand right there, you know, that makes for some easier climbing. This is just an exit pitch on Warrior's Way. And Matrix in 2001 is probably the most popular route on the left side. For a number of reasons, I think it really follows some cool features, and it also is protected well. This is Wes coming up the first pitch, which has like a 12C boulder problem. And here's a little video of Wes starting up the third pitch, and I'm shooting it from Little Miss, from across. I was on Little Miss with Benji, other partner, and just vertical, slightly leaning in, face climbing. This section mostly protected by bolts. Keep moving, Wes.
I always feel happy when that first bolt gets clipped. It's like,
It's not obvious how to find a hole. When you look it up, it all looks the same. So you kind of
Yeah.
have to feel
It
around
can be,
and find the right hole.
challenging to route find and know where it's going. So, but generally, it's up.
Yeah, you got it somewhere.
And we're really looking to make sure we're putting in quality bolts, and there've been some people going back to re-bolt some of the older trashy bolts, make it safer.
What were you what were you using to take the video?
My iPhone. Oh no, this was with like a GoPro.
Okay.
And Matrix, it climbs like right into this big cave in the middle of the face on Whiteside's called Whiteside's Hotel. And this is Wes climbing out, the next pitch, climbing out of the hotel and right into clouds. And yeah, it's like climbing up to the first bolt, so you know you want to make sure you don't fall onto the lake. And the first bolt back there, just getting ready to. And then the last hard pitch, where you can get a sense of the exposure, and it's like climbing across this feature, kind of a ramp where it actually has a lot of really nice natural gear, some cams. So that's Whiteside's. Succeeded. Succeeded on climbing, freeing Ball Wall, and then some others. Number 2 was Looking Glass, which worked on in '95. And when you look at the north face, there are some free routes over here, Lake Crack and the Loom and stuff. But the main business is right here, where a lot of the aid routes were, and the most logical line through there is Glass Menagerie. And Glass Menagerie was climbed in 1980 by Chief Gaskin and John Bertelsmann. And some people had been working on freeing it, and Todd Wells and Lee Munson were working on it, and maybe some others. But in the mid-90s, I had been climbing with Pascal Robert and Chris Klein, KK. I've been climbing with them on Whitesides, and Chris Klein, he actually give you a little background on the history of one of the routes on Whitesides, Ship of Fools. Like when Mark Crackbright and Eddie Whittemore did the bottom half of the wall, and then they escaped off of an Indian tree ledge. Well, the route kind of went up and then made a big C around toward like a tree, and then got back onto the face. Well, KK went there, and he pushed it straight for one pitch. And then I joined up with KK, and we pushed it even farther and called that the KKK variation. Back when I wasn't sensitive to those sorts of things. But Pascal is like, even now, I ran into him in April in Blackville. There's a climbing museum over there that they're putting together, North Carolina climbing, and so they were having a celebration there for Stone Mountain, and Pascal was there, and he's still like, lean and strong, and oh yeah, I can outside routines, still off the couch, but really, really talented, skilled climber. And KK also is in the height of his climbing ability, and so we decided to come together to see if we could work on freeing this climb. And there are basically 2 pitches that needed to be freed. There was the 3rd pitch and the 5th pitch. This Dahico pitch, and then the roof pitch, number 5. These images are from what Brian Miller took recently of Laban Swafford from Chattanooga climbing it. But what's interesting is the aid route goes up the Dahigo crack, and there's occasionally some bolts that are kind of out left on the face. But the free climb actually goes kind of up this face. There's a thin crack there, and the climbing is like really kind of awkward. And then you get in positions you have to reach over there to see if you can clip the bolts, because they're like over there closer to the Dahigo. Well, we were working on it, for several visits, and And then KK finally was able to lead this pitch. And I think we thought it was maybe 12C. I think some people that have repeated it over the years, I think it's somewhere in that range. Might be a little harder, but definitely not easier. And then there's a 511 pitch, and then it goes into this roof pitch here. And in the roof pitch, there are old bolts from the aid line that were rusting out, and we didn't want to be falling on those, working on freeing it. So we put in new bolts in between those or in strategic places, and then worked on freeing it. And the climbing is really, really interesting. It's like you have these features like where you can get your knee behind that and some pretty big edges, but a lot of it is pretty thin. And
Steep and long.
steep and long, yeah, and even the footholds, like right here, are just really incredibly small. Well, this is a picture where Pascal, led that pitch on the first ascent. And I gotta share a little interesting story about what happened here. When we were working on the roof pitch, the aid line goes on this diagonal and keeps going on a diagonal. But when the angle eases back where it's slabby, it's really smooth. And so we couldn't figure out how to free climb it. So we ended up, when the roof turned to the slab, we ended up going straight up. So we aided up the line and came back and put a couple of bolts on that variation on rappel, big ethic violation. And so some of the North Carolina climbers heard about it, like Whitney Hoyerman specifically, who'd done a lot of first ascents on Whitney class. And he was upset about it, and he said, Pascal, if you don't take those bolts out, I will. So what Pascal did, on the first ascent, he climbed up through this 513 stuff, over the bolts, with wrench in hand, took out the bolts on lead, doing the first ascent.
Oh my God.
Climbed all the way to the anchors, put the bolts in his pocket, and future climbers that wanted to climb it free were begging for those bolts. And so Pascal, he kept them, and finally they're back in. But it's an interesting story. Hang on to how things need to be. But so, in '95 and it was really more of a team ascent. It's like, some of us were able to climb the pitch, lead the pitch free. Some of us were able to follow the pitches free. But not everybody, led and followed all of the pitches free. So that was number 2. And then Table Rock in South Carolina, a couple years later. Well, I've climbed Stonewall Action, on the south face with Doc Main, and we would go to the north side and we climbed Reflections. And so, snuck in there, of course, But when I wanted to figure out, I think people, Shannon, do you know if anybody was interested in freeing Reflections or over the years, or?
Yeah, but it had like 2 pendulums in it, right?
Had what?
Reflections had 2 pendulums.
And it has 1 pendulum,
No, it has a double pendulum.
or a double pendulum.
Pitch 3 is a double pendulum.
Okay.
I think on the original now,
Yeah, but
The
anyway,
last route would be really difficult to free because the pitch stars are so small.
yeah. And that's what shut us down. Like, we were able to free it all the way up to this moss, up to here. Well, it was first climbed by Art Williams and Bob Mitchell in '72, and then Patrick Murdoch from Tennessee joined me, and so we were able to free the dihedral and free across the pendulums
Okay.
and climb up to here. And then when we saw that upper dihedral, it's like you said, it's like really thin
Just
cracks, arching,
Yeah.
and we actually started climbing up this way, and we got up about this far, and I drilled a bolt there, and I think it will actually go free in that direction, but you know, when you're in a position like that, going ground up, you got a choice. You say, okay, am I going to be able to climb a reasonable distance and find a place where I can stop and drill again? And couldn't answer that question. You know, so we ended up going down and not being able to climb it. But up to that point, you know, there was some 512 climbing, and maybe the dihedral will go free. You know, if it can be protected, and you know, people that you know don't have to use the crack for climbing, but can use face climbing and stemming technique to climb it. So, again, for you guys. Consideration. So those table rock, I wasn't able to, maybe if I'd have done a few more months, like Skinner had done on Northwest Face Half Dome.
You can still go back.
Yeah, I'd still go
The
back.
problem there is you're in the midst of rust.
And then number 4, Laurel Knob. It was first, Laurel Knob has quite a few free climbs on it. And I was particularly interested in this one right here. This feature that you can see, this diagonal crack. And it was attempted in the early 1990s by Burton Mumaw and Ralph Fickle. And then they pushed the route 2 pitches up the slabs, up here, what they call the space station, and then they made it right up to there, and they got a high bolt right there, and then they abandoned it. So in 2008, when I was checking it out, I contacted both of them to see if they were going to finish it, and if they would be interested in letting me come along. Well, I think Burton had some medical issues that maybe job-related issues that kept him from it, but Ralph was interested. So joined with Mr. Shannon back there, and decided to see if we could finish this route. So on the first trip, we climbed. This is what the first pitch looks like. It's like these and what the climbing on Laurel looks like. How many climbed on Laurel now? Really, it's like what's really cool about North Carolina is you got Looking Glass has its own unique kind of granite. Laurel Knob is different. Whitesides is different. You know, it's like there's so much variety there. Second pitch is more slab. It's not quite as steep as it looks right there, but this thing about the second pitch is where Shannon is right there, he's like about 20 feet out from the blade, no pro, and he's got the first crux. First crux, which is like a balancing move on some smears that's like 5'10" or so.
Factor 2 fall.
And that's where you fell. Factor 2 fall, past the blade, cuts his arm. He says, "Can you take the lead, Arno?" Yeah, I mean, it shook him up, right? Like it would any of us, right? But sometimes that's the kind of climbing that you run into on these routes over there. So it's really important to do your due diligence and know what you're getting into. I think it'd be really cool to have a bolt right there. It's like an ogre, you know?
Yeah, I actually found an easier way and remember from the
Yeah,
left.
on the left, you know, just can do that too.
Thank you.
But looking down on
I
that
had 2
pitch,
different jobs.
you know, there is some natural gear, but it's not very much of it. And there is one bolt right here that protects like a 511A slabby part. The rest of it is actually quite modern. But just climbing off the blade is just kind of freaky without any probe. It's just Ralph and Shannon kind of climbing up the same spot there. And the third pitch, this is like just a beautiful diagonal crack. And when we were climbing it on mixed free and aid, definitely saw that this is possible free climb. And it almost all natural gear too. There's like one bolt in the middle of it that Burton had put in back in the 90s. And the fourth pitch, what Shannon is holding on to there with his right hand is the high bolt that Burton and Ralph had in the 90s. And so this first trip, we made it past her high point and finished that fourth pitch. And we're there at the top of the fourth pitch, looking up. It's like, man, there's a lot more granite up there. And it's like we thought that you get up there and it's like leaning in, you get walked to the top or something, but no, it's still steep granite. So we come back, a few weeks later on our second trip, and we climb those first four pitches, and then we start pitch number 5, just traversing across to this like shallow water groove that we protected with bolts, and it's just incredibly beautiful climbing, like just stemming and opposition pressure, face climbing, not too hard, like 10-ish. Just Ralph finishing it. And then the next pitch we did, this is just the top of it, Shannon coming up, and it's kind of crystal face climbing, it's bouncy, and take a note of this rock right here. Does that look stable to you?
Did it make a noise when you don't fit?
But these pictures were taken on the trip when we actually made it to the summit. When we were here on this second trip, it was getting darker and darker. And when we got into this really deep water groove, pitch number 7, I got like right up to the top of the 7th pitch, and it was like dark. And I was looking up, and it's like there's still more rock up there. So we didn't know how much more you were going to have to climb to get to the top of this thing. So we wrapped off, came back for the third time, climbed all the way up to the 7th pitch, and the 8th pitch was like 5-0, no pro pitch, long, but still something where you wouldn't want to be just like walking up it. So we climbed that and then walked another 300 feet to get to the summit. And so we kept the same name that Burton and Ralph had initially, Defective Sonar. And then I started to work on free climbing it. And when I did free climb, make the first free ascent, it was with Tracy Martin, who used to guide for Fox Mountain Guides. She's in Vegas now. But I'd gone there with a few different partners to work on freeing it. Shannon came on some of those trips. The first pitch, this third pitch, some of the kind of positions, give you an idea of some of the positions you get into, like sideways smearing and live-backing. And the crack, it does protect, but you really have, it's a little bit flaring, and you have to really pay attention to how you're putting in the gear and the cams. And it takes passive and cams. But just really beautiful granite. This is the 4th pitch, which includes like the end of the crack, and then it just stops there where Burton had that last bolt. And you end up needing to do like an iron cross move to get to some edges to face climb the rest of that pitch. So both of those pitches are somewhere 12A range, the third and the fourth pitch. And then, of course, that water groove again. You can see these are the bolts that we put in there to protect it.
It looks harder in that picture than it did the last one. And the
It's
picture earlier.
smooth, you know, but it's so interesting. It's like you could stem it, a lot of opposition pressure. It's like dancing up. It really is. And there are plenty of bolts on it, you know, to keep it safe for sure. Just looking down at Tracy, you can see like bolts that were clipped, but here, you notice anything missing? That potato chip fell off. Right? It used to, it was sitting on like this slopey thing right there.
So nobody trundled it as far as you knew, it just came off on it?
We saw it at the base, you know, the part broken up. And just think if you were there when it came off. And then the deep water groove pitch, it's really beautiful climbing, and then the summit. So it came in at around 12A. So that was number 4. Made it through the journey of all 4 of them. So when we go back and just to kind of conclude this, like to think about, you know, this guy that inspired me, like when we think about people now, what does Anna Mondra do? Well, he just put up Silence, 515D, right, in a cave in Norway. You see him there hanging? You know, now, what you can think about is like, what kind of a Carolina version could I have of that? You ever think about that? Well, put your photo there, and then take a look. Take a closer look. Take a closer look, and holy moly, there's possibilities. There's possibilities. Look at that cave. Right? Don't let me email that to Adam, okay? You guys take charge. So I'd like to thank these photographers, you know, for the images. I think Brian Miller with Fixed Line, he's actually working on an article for one of the climbing bags on slab climbing in North Carolina. You know, like what unique kind of learning challenges it provides and opportunities. So it'd be nice to see that come out. And Evolve is our Warriors Way sponsor. And that's it. Thanks. The brief history. Just a few little snippets here and there.
We're not worthy.
So where were you living during all this mess? Where were you based out of?
In Tennessee.
When you were doing all that North Carolina stuff?
That's probably why they were pissed off. You were in
You
North
were a
Carolina.
foreigner. A foreigner coming in from Tennessee.
Now, why do you think it's called Vol Wall?
There's a climb at Tennessee Wall called Big Orange Country.
No, you know, when you're young and your ego's strong, you know, you want to kind of make a statement.
Did you ever get to climb Dennis's route before it got chopped? Either.
No, Dennis Gatsky?
Yeah.
No,
Did you get a chance?
no.
What?
It got chopped a few times, didn't it?
Huh?
It got chopped a few times.
Yeah, I know, more than once. I was just curious.
Yeah, no. I haven't climbed mainline either with Doc Bateman.
I think there's still another project there. Chad's been working around for like 20 years. So I want to call him and see if he's still game. I think it's somewhere to the left of those
Left of traditions, yeah. I mean, Root Doctors is there too, right? I haven't done that one either.
You know Chad Gardner, don't you?
You're what?
You know Chad Gardner?
Chad Garner, yeah.
Highlands.
Yeah. Thank you for insurance, no, Rolfer.
I used to work for you.
But one thing to keep in mind is like, Whiteside's got a reputation of having depth routes and anything like that, just like, labeling that head wall impossible, it's like, just go take a look. You can do like a pitch or two, or engage and let the climbing itself determine, what it is instead of just what reputation it might have. It's like, yeah, the routes are hard, some of them are run out, and in some situations you don't want to get into, like that second pitch on defective sonar on Laurel Knob. I'd rather do that variation climbing in, on the left side. But a big part of the mental training, just to diverge a little bit in the Warriors way, like a big part of the mental training is shifting from like an all or nothing way of looking at things to finding little ways to engage, to let that engagement determine what's real and not just your mind's preconceptions about it beforehand. So, I didn't mean to scare you away from these walls. I'd rather you see it as inspiring and find a way to engage it and check it out.
How many people have died on the White Sox?
None that we know of.
Well,
they get buried in secret at the
I
bottom.
know, like,
They're all in that cave.
some Israeli tourists fell off El Cap taking a selfie.
That was on Nevada Falls.
Okay, that's...
Yeah, he was trying to get the perfect shot and just...
So, I mean, there could have been somebody died on Whiteside.
That's natural selection there.
It's a tourist. Minor. There's been some people that have gotten hurt at some falls.
When I was in Yosemite in May, I did this. You know how they have little shows there? They had the rescue people doing it, and they said most of the people that die there are doing shit like that. They're like, "Oh, let me get a great picture, like right on the edge of the fall, and like what this guy did."
Or some people got into the water at the top of Vernal Falls and
That
got
happens
washed over.
every few years. Every few years
Yeah.
that happens. Because they got big signs. They got signs all over the beach up there, like don't get in the water. Because you get in that water and you're swimming around, you're like, yay! It's a river and it's moving. And as soon as you start moving, it's all slippery.
They said most of the thing is drownings there,
100-foot ride.
and like people like around when it's like high water around the boulders, they're like, "Oh, let me get a picture on top of the boulder," and they slip, and then they get stuck in like a drain trap and they can't get out.
Good time.
Anybody have questions about North Carolina or Carolina or climbing or any of those walls or routes?
Do you think there's still a bunch of like unexplored areas still to be open that might be like on private land or something?
Like new walls, new.
The Chuck Wall.
We're not going to share any of that.
Shannon might know better than I mean, there are some that are, on private land. Like, there's an old wall that's like in the Cashews Valley. It's where Camp Marywood is, I think. And, it was, we climbed on it, years and years ago, but then it got closed, and I think there was potential for climbing there.
What's the one next to the golf course?
Yeah.
Falls or something like that? You see it from Whiteside. It's like a golf
Yeah.
course, and you have to go to the golf course to get to it.
I think so,
I don't know. We were kind of confused. Chuck and I did the OR like a month ago. And there were like 7 bolts on that first pitch. So look at everyone was like, "What?"
We do have that troll moment every once in a while. We gotta go like super glue some bolt hammers on the wall and take a picture just to freak people
Put it on a
out.
mountain project. Oh, that'd be a shit show there. Oh, I gotta chop those.
I'll never forget though, the first time I went to Whitesides, we were gonna do the OR. Never been down there before, and the wall's real intimidating when you get down to the bottom because it's a big mofo and it's like starts out slab and then gets steeper, so the steep part looks even steeper because of the slab. And there were some guys on Whipping Boy, I think. And like we get to the bottom and we're roping up, and all I hear is rock, and like this big old chunk of rock comes falling out of the mountain, busting to pieces. It's like, all right, on the way. that was the intro to Whiteside.
What kind of planning did you discover in when you were first developing Whitesides that you took and elaborated in your other development? What were some learning experiences that you took and built upon?
So like planning mistakes
Yeah.
and how that kind of changed over time. I guess in categories, like really look at all of the equipment, and everything, all of the different tasks that you need to do that you need equipment for. Like it might be hauling or G-mooring or leading or aid climbing. So looking at like equipment holistically, food and water, and how you want to cook it, and like food, shelter, and clothing, kind of that, and then equipment, kind of categorizing it and making lists. Making lists so that I check it off and make sure I'm not forgetting something.
What special systems do you have in place on a trip? What do you have? Certain developed checklists that you developed over time?
Mostly for just like planning the logistics beforehand. Not too much, on the wall itself. Just usually talk that out with the partners to see who's going to do what and what we need. If we're going to be on the wall overnight or not, and kind of a day strategy of what that's going to look like as far as where you need to get to, turnaround time, if you're going to wrap back down, things like that. Does that answer your question?
What is what was your initial inspiration for putting up First Ascents?
First Ascents in general?
Yeah, just in general. What kind of inspired you to go from develop to undeveloped?
Well, it actually didn't progress that way. When I started climbing in '73 in Tennessee, on the crags that I was climbing on, there were no routes. So we just had pitons and a hammer and a rope and the Swami belt and just started climbing.
Where did you start?
It was.
Other than that, I can't remember what the place was called.
There was one place. I grew up in Manchester, which is kind of between Nashville and Chattanooga on I-24, and there's a limestone cliff along the Duck River there that was just really short. We started climbing there, but then we went to Savage Gulf area.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and climbed at Stone Door,
Yeah.
which, maybe
In there?
maybe 100 feet. And I think there was one wall that they called the Vanderbilt Wall, where Vanderbilt students were coming to do top rope climbing. But everything else is like, we just said, hey, what about that? And we just don't climb. So it was like I was putting up First Ascents, but didn't really see it as being anything out of the ordinary.
Yeah, so the adventure and the unknown.
Yeah.
Well, there probably were no guidebooks for that area back there.
No. I think Chris Hall's guidebook on Tennessee came out, later. But when I went out west, I was in the Boulder area finishing school, and so repeating routes there. So I wasn't doing any First Ascents. But then when I moved to Wyoming, it's like there's a lot smaller climbing population, and it's almost all that they were doing was First Ascents. At least, the four of us that were kind of interested in doing that. So we were all climbing around 5'10", 5'11", and so we'd partner up together and go out and do First Ascent. So kind of got a taste for that there. And then, meeting Skinner and Piana and seeing what they were doing. So when I came back to Tennessee in '84, I was kind of in that mode. But I guess a motivation behind it was I wanted to find a way to contribute to climbing history in some way. first ascents is like a really obvious, typical way that we can do that. And I think for me, it's going to be more of this, you know, than anything I've done, you know, as far as first ascents, which is fine. You know, it's just, I think we all want to matter, you know, in some way to a larger community that we're a part of. And climbing is such a great community. You know, you go all around the world and people have similar aspirations as you, and it's great to be a part of that community, which is actually kind of small when you think about it.
Do you find from when you were putting up first ascents, and as you stated about contributing to the climbing community and having that as some sort of motivation, do you find that maybe this newer generation, their motivations are a little bit different from the initial kind of pioneers? And so specifically as we're thinking about, okay, well, contributing to maybe the climbing community may not be a first free ascent, but it may be like a free solo or something.
Yeah, it might take different forms.
Right, exactly.
Right. I think we all kind of go through certain stages as we age. When we're younger, we're in a lot of ways more interested in like finding out who we are and creating an identity that's tied to some tangibles, like first ascents. But I think in anything, there's always like intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, you know, for doing something. Like, wanting to have your name on a first ascent is kind of an extrinsic motivator, but there's also a passion for climbing that drives you to actually do it. And so I think as we get older and we learn, the intrinsic motivators can take more precedence over the desire, you know, to tie your name to something. So, but I think any generation kind of goes through those phases. You know, just might be different forms that it takes. For Alex, you know, it's free soloing. But we were free soloing years ago. It's just one was hard. It was long. Yeah, Tracy was free soloing.
She's saving it up. 5 years from now, she's going to start soloing everything. Right?
I'm saving that round.
She's going to be 100% bionic. She's just going to track it all.
So Arno, did you, when you mentioned when you first started climbing, you started like climbing like normal, like 5'8", 5'9", progressing up. But the thing I've noticed is like you get to a certain level, but you gotta actually train to get to a higher level. Did you have any particular things that you did to train to get to like from a 5 of 10 to 11 to the 12s?
Yeah.
Because I think people are misled by a lot of the pro climbers. They think they're well, they've been climbing since little kids and they just can do that, but they're training on the side to stay at that level.
Yeah, they're training a lot.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they're doing hangboard trainings, art training. You know, I mean,
yeah.
If they don't,
there's probably more of that than the actual climbs.
Probably, you know, but you know, I was training mostly in the late 80s and early 90s, and it was like really unknown at that time. You know, so we would draw from stuff that Tony Yanero was doing with crack machines, and John Backer had these backer ladders, you know.
Yeah.
And then we had this, heard by these people doing weighted hangs, you know, hanging with extra weight on it, like dead hangs. And so we started doing that, and that's one of the only times I've injured myself training, climbing. It's like pulled something right here, you know, because it's, you know, like fully stretched out, so the ligament or tendon, whatever it is, you know, was their weak point. But we got stronger.
Yeah.
You know, we were doing art training, we were doing this dead hangs, and it helped.
You still do it?
Yeah. But on a hangboard.
Yeah.
Much more structured.
Because I noticed, like, since I started hangboarding, I got a lot stronger. I mean, that was like the really big thing that I could say was the big changing point.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, And it can be fun too. It's like you can make your climbing training fun. You know, just you can track it. You know, just see how you're progressing over time, and it's fun to do. You know, with a partner. But the thing is, like, I can basically climb as hard now as I did when I was like 25,
Yeah.
30. It's like, just think about that.
Well,
What's
that's
the
because you're
deal?
staying in shape.
But it's like,
What are you eating?
Because you
You're more efficient now too, baby. Right?
yeah, but you know, it's
You're not eating the whole cream pie either.
there's so many things come together, you know, that accumulate over time.
Yeah.
You know, like how you approach it mentally, and how your energy efficiency and movement improves over time.
That makes a big difference.
Yeah. Definitely does. And when you're climbing on 512 or maybe pushing 513, and you know that Panamonga is doing 515, it's not like when 513 was the top grade. It's like, ooh, I can't do that. It's just, you know, it's funny how the mental influences that, you know, through time. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for being here.